All right, so we completed the book of zakat. Took several weeks, maybe it took like 2 months. And then we completed the book of fasting in one session. That was last week. So now we're going to start in the book of pilgrimage. I ask Allah Ta'ala to make it easy for me and for you. The author says, pilgrimage. After the author, may Allah have mercy upon him, completed his discourse on fasting, he started talking about Hajj, which is heading towards the Kaaba to perform specific acts. So that's how that was translated here. It means Qasdul Kaaba. Al-Hajj means in Arabic language Qasd. Qasd means seeking. So I say it means targeting the Kaaba. Yani, it means embarking on a mission to the Kaaba to perform specific acts. That's Hajj. That's how you define it. And he started talking about Umrah. It says here, the minor pilgrimage. Don't know if that's something in the Arabic or if that's something they coined there for your comprehension. Which is what I think is the case. Which is visiting the Kaaba to perform known acts. So you might say, okay, Hajj is, as this translator said, heading towards the Kaaba. And Umrah is visiting the Kaaba. What's the difference here? The difference is, so I'd say Hajj is a mission to the Kaaba. So mission has more importance than a visit. But they said here minor pilgrimage because Umrah is like Hajj. It is like, it is minor pilgrimage. In some lesson I said before, a mini Hajj. That's why you can do both of them at the same time. It's possible to do the Hajj and the Umrah simultaneously. Just like you can do Hajj and then Umrah, or you can do Umrah and then Hajj. The author said, section 23, clarifying the rules of Hajj and Umrah. Hajj and Umrah are obligatory once during the lifetime, once in a lifetime. You can say if you want. Hajj and Umrah are obligatory once in a lifetime. As for Hajj being obligatory, that's a consensus. As for Umrah being obligatory, that's the Shafi'i school. Other schools said, no, Umrah is only Sunnah. The obligation to perform them accepts being postponed as long as they are performed before death. That's also the Shafi'i school. This means if you become able to perform Hajj or Umrah, you're still allowed to delay performing them. You're not obligated to perform them in the year in which you become able to do them. That's the Shafi'i school. But if there ever came a year in which it were obligatory on you to perform those, and if you die without performing those, then upon death, a major sin will be written against you. Just like a prayer that you missed with an excuse, or a fasting that you missed with an excuse. Aren't you allowed to delay that prayer that you missed with an excuse and to delay the fasting that you missed with an excuse? Fasting has other details like before Ramadan, the next Ramadan. Yes. So if you die without performing that, although you are allowed to delay it, then upon death you'll have a major sin written upon you because you were able to. When it comes, though, to making up what you missed without an excuse, then its time is already in. So you need to make it up immediately. Any prayer, any fasting, any zakat, any Hajj that you missed without an excuse, then you have to do it immediately. Hajj and Umrah are obligatory on the free accountable, i.e., sane and pubescent Muslim. That's clear. You know what that means. Hence, they are not obligatory on the original kafir. Talked about original kafir. So that statement is important. Yani, I'm afraid if a person is very attached to using the word revert, is not going to understand some religious rules. It's going to be crippled in fiqh. Because he's not easily accepting there's something called original kafir. Then he's not going to understand some rules. If there is something that's called original kafir, it means you're a convert, not a revert. Hence, they are not obligatory on the original kafir, al-kafir al-asli, in the sense that they are not demanded from them while in the state of kufr. Yani, if a person was never a Muslim, that's really something, never a Muslim. So not born as a Muslim, that's what it means. Not born as a Muslim. He was never a Muslim. He's called kafir asli, original kafir. So this one, if he embraces Islam, then whatever he missed in his state of kufr is erased. He doesn't have to make it up. Also, they are not obligatory on the slave. So, yani, before I move on, since I said all that, just to remind you. So what's right is to say every newborn is born on the fitrah. Born on the fitrah. The fitrah is the readiness for monotheism. Yani has compatibility is already installed in him. Compatibility for monotheism is installed in him from the time he's born. That's fitrah. Even if he's born as a kafir. So he could be original kafir, he's still going to be born on fitrah. So that's the right thing to say there. So you can replace, if you're a person who says that other statement, replace it with this statement. It's better for you to say correct statement in religion. Also, that's Hajj and Umrah, are not obligatory on the slave, whether partially or totally in bondage. Whether a person is partially a slave or totally a slave. I could be partially a slave. Like two people both purchased a slave, so they're partners in this slave. Yani they were partners in their money, and they, with their shared money, they purchased a slave, so they're partners in this slave. So if one of them frees his share, then if he can afford to cover the other person's share, this person becomes completely free. But if he can't afford to cover the other person's share, when we say he could afford to cover the other person's share, that means he's going to pay him what he lost, basically. Two people sharing in a slave. One person frees his share. The other person didn't free his share. The one who freed his share of this slave, if he can afford to cover the other one's share, then this slave is completely free and he has to pay his partner for what he just lost. But if he can't afford to cover his partner's share of this slave, then this person is now partially a slave. He's still a slave for the other one, so he'll be free sometimes and he'll be a slave at other times. Whenever he was a slave for that one, he'll be free. And whenever he was a slave for the other one, he'll be a slave. Hajj is not obligatory on this one. So whether one is partially a slave or totally a slave. Nor is the Hajj obligatory on the impubescent child, yani the pre-pubescent child. But if he does it, it's valid. Just like he could pray, it's valid. No, it's not enough for his lifetime. Your question is, if the child goes and does the Hajj before he's mumayyiz, that's your question. Before he's mumayyiz, no, it's not going to be good enough to fulfill the obligation to do it once in a lifetime. But the condition of mumayyiz in your question is not a condition for the answer. If he's pre-pubescent child, mumayyiz or not mumayyiz, he didn't reach puberty, then if he performs the Hajj, he will not drop the obligation of performing it once in a lifetime. After he reaches puberty, he'd have to do it again. Now, if he's not pubescent, if he's not mumayyiz, then can he get more than the tawaf? Because you could put wudu on the child. You can wash the child's organs for wudu and make an intention on the child's behalf, clear the child of najasa, and take the child around the Kaaba, baby, for example, before mumayyiz. That's valid for the baby. Can you take the baby for the whole Hajj? I never heard, but I know you can take them around the Kaaba. Same thing for the insane person. Also, the obligation of performing Hajj and Umrah is conditional to being physically able, i.e., if one possesses the means. The means the tools, including funds and provisions. Yani means he has the money, he has the luggage, he has the ride. So luggage means he needs bags and needs even containers. So he has the means. If one possesses the means, including funds, provisions, and other essential things, to transport oneself to Mecca and back home, i.e., if it is in excess of what one needs to cover his debts, even if they were deferred debts, and to cover his appropriate lodging, even if rented. Appropriate lodging means doesn't have to live in a box, doesn't have to live in a cardboard box for his trip, and appropriate clothing. And his assets must also be in excess of the provisions appropriated for those he is obligated to provide for, such as his wife, destitute parents, and similar descendants from the beginning of his journey to the end. So it means, in brief words, you have to be able to cover your expenses, to be obligated to go. So we're talking about conditions for the obligation, not conditions for the validity. Similar dependence. Thank you. Similar dependence. We're not talking about conditions for validity here. We talk about conditions for obligation, to be obligated. So you have to be able to cover your trip with all that, what all of that includes. And if you have debts, even if they're not due, but if you were to take your trip, you wouldn't be able to pay the debt, even if it's not due, then you don't have to go to the Hajj. You're not obligated. And you have to be able to cover your dependents for the whole time of your trip, or else you don't have to go to the Hajj. And similar dependents, we said, such as his wife, his destitute parents, his poor parents, and similar dependents, his prepubescent children who don't have their own money, from the beginning of his journey to the end, starting from the time of one's departure to Hajj, along with his stay in Mecca, continuing until his return to his hometown. The integrals of pilgrimage are 6. The integral here refers to the acts without which Hajj is invalid, and they are not compensated for with slaughter. Yani, When we talk about integrals in the chapter of Hajj, has very important definition. Like other deeds, the integrals of the Hajj are what make the actual Hajj itself. The integrals are the Hajj itself. Just like the integrals of the prayer, they are the prayer itself. The intention, the takbir, the standing, the reciting, the bowing, the prostrating, those are the integrals of the prayer. The integrals of the Hajj, the ihram, and the shaving, and the tawaf, and the sa'i, and being at Arafah, that is the Hajj. So without these things, the Hajj is invalid, and they are not compensated for with slaughter. They're not compensated for with slaughter. Means if you miss them, there's nothing you can do but do them. So then, to understand this well, you need to understand that you're not going to invalidate them unless you invalidate, unless you do the one and only invalidator. What's the one and only invalidator of the Hajj and the Umrah? Give you only a 5 count for this. 5, 4, 3, 2. Kufr, correct answer. The apostasy. Apostasy is going to invalidate your Hajj altogether. Then you stop dead in your tracks. You come back to Islam. And then you're going to have to repeat. When I say you stop dead in your tracks, that means your Hajj is done. Sit, khalas. But you know, there's something that could ruin your Hajj. Could ruin your Hajj. Which is what? What's going to ruin your Hajj? Not what we just called invalidating it. What's going to ruin it? And there's only one thing that's going to ruin your Hajj. I'll give you also only a 5 count here, although could use a 10 count. 5. So the one and only thing that's going to ruin your Hajj, that doesn't mean invalidate it, according to what we have explained. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The one and only thing that's going to ruin your Hajj is sexual intercourse. What? Somebody gave the answer intercourse. Okay. Even though the answer is lacking. If you want, then I'll give you 5 more so you can fix it. So I started at 2. So 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Before tahallul. Still missing something. So I'll give you 3 more. 3, 2, 1.5. 1. For the first tahallul. Sexual intercourse before the first tahallul. Because there's 2 tahalluls. What does this talk mean here? For if you're just learning about Hajj. So in Hajj, one of the integrals is to get into the state of ihram. It's like saying Allahu Akbar to start your prayer. You don't have to say a statement though, you just need to make the intention. When you say Allahu Akbar to start your prayer, you're now entering into your prayer. You have to be now not turning from the Qibla, not playing with anyone, not eating or drinking, not talking. Until you say Assalamu alaikum, then you will get out of the ihram for your prayer. So in Hajj, you're going to make the intention. That's the ihram. So now you're in the ihram for your Hajj. Now you can't wear certain types of clothing, and you can't put grease in your hair, you can't clip your nails, you can't hunt, you can't have sexual intercourse, you can't get married. How are you going to get out of this ihram? You're not going to say assalamu alaikum and you're out of ihram. In order to get out of the ihram, you have to do certain parts of the nusuk. Nusuk means the Hajj or the Umrah. You have to do certain parts of the nusuk that's going to release you. So there's two unravelings or two releases. Yani, it takes place on two levels. So if you do some acts of the Hajj, it's going to undo the first knot, if you want, figurative knot. It's going to undo that first figurative knot. Now that's the first tahallul. If you had sexual intercourse after that, still haram, but it's not going to ruin your Hajj. It's not going to ruin your Hajj. But there's still a question that remains, which is, what's the difference? What does this mean? What does ruining the Hajj mean? If it doesn't mean invalidating it, what does it mean? Ruining the Hajj, which is only going to be by sexual intercourse before the first tahallul, it means that you have to finish doing your Hajj and then you're going to have to make it up anyway. You have to finish and then make it up anyway. As for invalidating the Hajj, you're done. Khalas. You don't finish. You're just done. It's only going to be by apostasy, and then you need to embrace Islam immediately, of course, and then repeat. If you ruin your Hajj, then you have to finish it and then repeat. And we're saying all of this to say what? We're saying all of this to say what's here. It says the integrals of pilgrimage are 6. The integral here refers to the acts without which Hajj is invalid. Without these acts, the Hajj is invalid. Okay, so without them, the Hajj is invalid. So now I'm not going to look into the Arabic, but something crossed my mind here. Another word, it might be a better word here, at least in English. Without all of these integrals, the Hajj is incomplete. It's incomplete because you need to finish it. Even if you ruin it, you have to finish it. What if you didn't ruin it? So you might not ruin your Hajj, but if you don't do all the integrals of Hajj, then it's incomplete and it's not invalid also. It's only going to become invalid by apostasy. So I'm going to look real quick just to see what this Arabic says. I think that's an important difference. Because maybe you're going to think that when we say without all those integrals, your Hajj is incomplete, means it's over now. You broke it. It's not broken. What's going to happen is you're going to stay in a state of ihram until you complete it. لا يصح الحج بدونها. That's interesting. He says it's not valid. It's not valid. لا يصح الحج without them. The Arabic says وأركان الحج ستة. There's 6 integrals of Hajj. ونعني بالركن في باب الحج الأعمال التي لا يصح الحج بدونها. And what we mean by integral in the chapter of Hajj are the acts without which the Hajj is not valid. لا يصح. ولا يجبر بدم, and it's not compensated for by a sacrifice. Okay. So لا يصح يعني, the meaning you need to understand here is not complete. It's not complete. Even if years later, if you have to go back and do the sa'i, or you have to go back and do the tawaf, then you have to do that. The first integral is al-ihram. Yes. That is the intention to engage in the ritual of Hajj or Umrah. So the ihram is the intention. The ihram is not the undressing, and the ihram is not the putting on two wraps. The ihram is the intention. The intention to engage in the ritual of Hajj or Umrah. So there's one word for this ritual of Hajj or Umrah is nusuk, N-U-S-U-K. Nusuk, no extension. Don't say nusuk, nusuk. For example, to determine in one's heart, I initiate the act of Hajj. If one wants to perform Hajj or Umrah. Yeah, okay. For example, to determine in one's heart, I initiate the act of Hajj, if one wants to perform Hajj. Or I initiate the act of Umrah, if one wants to perform Umrah. The punctuation in this sentence could use some improvement. I'm not going to stop here though. One is allowed to combine both Hajj and Umrah in the intention. He could say in his heart, I now intend Hajj and Umrah. Or one could even intend without specifying which one. He's so basically saying, I now enter into the state of Ihram. So now, what's the meaning of being in the state of Ihram without specifying if he's doing Hajj or Umrah? The meaning is now he can't wear certain types of clothing, can't get married, can't have sexual intercourse, can't clip his nails, can't grease his hair, etc. Can't hunt until he does some nusuk and gets out of the state of Ihram. The second integral of Hajj is to stay in Arafah. I mean, it's a landmark, if you want. It's an area, i.e., to be in any part of the land of Arafah, to be there. So the way it's translated here says to stay. And the way they usually say it in Arabic is al-wuquf, which one might translate as standing. Standing is not a condition. Just the condition is to be there in any part of it. To be in any part of the land of Arafah during a certain time, though. Sometime between the sun's declination westward on the day of Arafah, which is the 9th of Dhul-Hijjah, until the dawn of Eid, which is the 10th of Dhul-Hijjah. Okay. SubhanAllah. You know, we were recently doing some Hajj lessons that we actually didn't complete. And mashallah, I found them very beneficial. And one of the benefits that I got out of those lessons we were reviewing together is the meaning of what we usually call the prayer times. Prayer times, right? Call them prayer times. When does Dhuhr come in? When the sun declines out of its zenith. When does Asr come in? When the shadow reaches a certain length. When does Maghrib come in? When the disk of the sun is down. Yes. But those times also, they apply to other things. So I realized, I separated the time from the prayer. Studying the chapter of Hajj allowed me to separate the time from the prayer. We usually call it the prayer time. Because they say here what I just told you. Arafah is a land and you have to be there at a certain time. I used to say to myself, why didn't it just say from Dhuhr time until Fajr time? Seems to me to be clear. From Dhuhr time until Fajr time. Yani, if you said that would be correct. But I thought, why didn't it say it? Why didn't it say it? What's the difference? Is there a difference? Then I understood. So they say the time for Arafah is from the sun declining out of its zenith until dawn. That's its whole time. So it takes up several prayer time blocks. The time of Arafah is as long as several blocks of or several prayers, covering Dhuhr time, Asr time, Maghrib time, and Isha time. So I think that's clear, inshaAllah ta'ala. And that's on a particular day also. From the 9th of Dhul Hijjah until the 10th. Between those hours I told you. The 10th starts when the sun goes down. So the sun comes out of its zenith on the 9th of Dhul Hijjah. Maghrib comes in. That's the 10th of Dhul Hijjah, and the time of Arafah ends when Fajr comes in. You have to be there somewhere in that district there. You have to be there, and that fulfills your obligation. Like, you could be standing there, you could be sitting there, you could be sleeping there, you could be in a helicopter floating, suspended over the ground there. It's valid. You could be just passing by, but you're there. So that's the second integral. First one was the ihram. Second one is the Arafah, being at Arafah. And this being at Arafah is the most important one. Umrah lacks this integral. You don't have Arafah in Umrah. And that's why you can do Umrah any time of the year. You can't do Hajj any time of the year. Because Arafah only comes once a year. Take Arafah out, and then you can do Umrah any time of the year. In the hadith, the Prophet ﷺ said, Al-Hajju Arafah. The Hajj is Arafah. That means it's the most important part. The third integral is the Tawaf. That is to circumambulate, that means to circle. That is to circle the Kaaba 7 times. I don't know a difference between those two words. Circumambulate and circle. I like circle. Its time starts after midnight of the 10th of Dhul Hijjah. Starts after midnight. What's midnight? You can tell me what's midnight. 5 count for you only. What's midnight? 5, 4, 3, 2. Not the halfway point between Isha and Fajr. Yes. Yeah. Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah.
No, he said that. I'm sorry.
So if that's what you were going to say, I was just answering somebody else. If that's what you were going to say, that's not the answer. Not halfway between Isha and Fajr.
Oh, Shaykh. I was going to say halfway between Maghrib and Isha. Maghrib and Fajr.
Correct. Halfway between Maghrib and Fajr. That's midnight. Maghrib means sunset. Fajr means dawn. Sunset means the disk of the sun is completely below the horizon. Dawn is the white light in the eastern horizon. I've never been for Hajj or Umrah, mashallah. Its time starts after midnight of the 10th of Dhul Hijjah. Amin. And you too. You know, it was said about one of the mujtahids. If I remember right, it's one of the 2 Sufyans. You know, there's 2 Sufyans. Both of them are mujtahids. He said, it was reported about him that he said he made Hajj every year. Every time he would complete a Hajj, he would make dua that Allah enables him to do it again. And one year he said, I feel shy, if I remember how it goes, I feel shy now to ask Allah to let me do it again. And that was the year he died. Allah answers the dua, brothers and sisters. Allah has the power to do anything possible. طيب. So we're on the third integral here. It says here the third integral is tawaf. So first integral was ihram. Second integral was arafah. And we said, when do you do that? Third integral was tawaf. And we said, when do you do that? So as for the ihram, when do you do that? It doesn't say here. So I'm not going to say right now. As for the arafah, we just said, when do you do that? On the 9th of Dhul Hijjah, it extends from when Dhuhr time starts on the 9th of Dhul Hijjah until Fajr comes in on the 10th. The third is the tawaf. Tawaf starts after midnight of the 10th. So if we were to suppose that this midnight is at Isha time, just supposing only, that this midnight is at Isha time, so that means then that the 9th of Dhul Hijjah, when the sun came out of its zenith, that's Dhuhr time, that's time for Arafah. Asr comes in, it's time for Arafah. Maghrib comes in, it's time for Arafah. Midnight, let's say Maghrib goes out, Isha comes in, still time for Arafah. Midnight comes in, now you can make tawaf. Also, it's time for tawaf. And so it's time for Arafah and it's time for tawaf. The times of those both now are in effect. I'm just not talking about the sequence between them, just talk about the time. And then when Fajr comes in, Arafah time is over, but Tawaf time has started. And this Tawaf time is not going to be invalidated unless you do the one and only invalidator. Now, the fourth integral is as-sa'i, which means striding. It means walking with energy. That is to traverse the area between the border markers of Mount Safa and Mount Al-Marwa. Yes. So if you want to call that base anything you assign. Base could be a wall, base could be a rock, for example. So if you want to call that base, then there's a marker. From As-Safa to Al-Marwa, you have to start at As-Safa and end at Al-Marwa. That's one time. You have to go 7 times. You go from Al-Marwa, then back to As-Safa, that's 2. Then from As-Safa to Al-Marwa, that's 3. And like that, back and forth, each time is 1. Sa'i is performed after the major obligatory tawaf or the arrival tawaf. Okay. So now we're on the fourth integral, as-sa'i, which is the striding between the 2 mountains, or between the 2 bases that are between the 2 mountains. That's number 4. When does its time start? Its time is this way or that way, this way or that way. What I mean is, it needs to go behind a tawaf. So either you make tawaf when you first get to Mecca, that's a sunnah tawaf, Doing this will allow you to make sa'i, or it's going to be after the obligatory tawaf. So this way or that way. Whichever way you did it, you fulfilled the integral of sa'i. But sa'i is linked to tawaf in a way that it needs to come after tawaf. So it's going to be either after obligatory tawaf or the tawaf you already did when you got into Mecca. So if you do it after the obligatory tawaf, that means what? That means you're not going to do it before midnight of the 10th of Dhul-Hijjah. The border markers of Mount Safa and Mount Marwa were physical markers identifying where one must reach for his sa'i to be valid. And like the other integrals, it's not going to be invalidated. So if you don't do it, you need to do it. This is the problem with the expanded, what's called mas'a, which is the sa'i boundaries. The sa'i boundaries, they have been invalidly expanded. And then they force the people to make sa'i out of bounds, thereby making people not have valid sa'i. Thereby, they don't get out of the state of ihram. That's Shafi'i school. And it's going to be haram according to the Hanafi school. And then you're going to have to do it according to Shafi'i school. Question. If someone made it to the third integral of Hajj and then committed kufr and then re-entered Islam after, does he or she simply have to remake their intention and continue the rest of their Hajj? They have to do complete Hajj. Complete Hajj. So that's going to then depend on when they came back to Islam. If they came back to Islam in such a way that they can still do a complete Hajj, then they're going to do it. If they came back to Islam, for example, after Arafah, then means there's no way they can do a complete Hajj. They're going to have to do it the next year. Because Arafah time runs out. That one is the one that runs out. The other ones don't run out. So it says the border markers of Mount Safa and Mount Marwa were physical markers identifying where one must reach for his sa'i to be valid. They have been destroyed in this era, and other signs have replaced them. The fifth integral is shaving, i.e. removing the hair down to the root with a blade. That's shaving. Yani cutting it bald. Not low, not just low, but bald. That's sunnah for a man, and either disliked or haram for a woman, meaning there's two sayings. Disliked or haram for a woman. SubhanAllah. You know, there's a Democrat. This is bald lady, bald-headed black lady. I don't know her name. Whenever I see this lady, I say, this is so ridiculous, Yani. And the thing is, these people like that, they expect you to take them seriously. Anyway, so the fifth integral is shaving, i.e. removing the hair down to the root with a blade. Or trimming one's hair, i.e. cutting 3 or more hairs without going as far as the root. This is what's sunnah for the women, to trim, not to cut bald. Its time starts after midnight of the day of Eid. So the shaving or trimming, this fifth integral is shaving or trimming. The shaving or trimming starts also at the same time the tawaf starts. And sa'i needs to be after a tawaf. And the sixth integral is to observe the order in most of these integrals. Hence, it is obligatory to produce the intention of ihram before all the other integrals. So that has to be in the front. and to delay one's tawaf or shaving or trimming until after one's stay at Arafah. Yani, you don't make tawaf or shave or trim before Arafah. Although the time for Arafah and the time for tawaf run concurrently at a certain point. Right? That's clear? The time for Arafah and the time for tawaf and shaving and trimming run concurrently at a certain point, which is midnight of Eid. Time for Arafah still in, and the time for tawaf and shaving start, but you still need to do the Arafah before you do the tawaf or the shaving. And you have to do sa'i after a tawaf. So you're able to shave before you make tawaf or make tawaf before you shave. And it's possible that you did sa'i before obligatory tawaf, since you could do a sa'i after your arrival tawaf, which is only sunnah. But this will fulfill your integral. Wallahu ta'ala a'lam. Any question? He said, what is the judgment for the one who assigns another to throw the stones? It is not valid for someone to assign another to do the bodily worship for him unless he's sick, except for the zakat. For the zakat, you can appoint someone to distribute your zakat for you. You can say, here's my zakat money, and entrust it to someone who's reliable to distribute it for you, to put it in its proper place. That's valid. But for other than zakat, you can't appoint someone or assign someone, as you put in your question, to do your bodily worship for you. So what is the judgment for their Hajj? Did they invalidate the Hajj? Did you hear when I said what the one and only invalidator of Hajj is? The one and only invalidator of Hajj is apostasy. So you're not going to invalidate that. But it won't be complete if you don't fulfill the conditions. So you'll have to complete it. But you talk about throwing the stones, though. You're not talking about the integral. Throwing the stone is not an integral. So it's not going to invalidate the Hajj. Question, can Hajj or Umrah be performed on behalf of another person if the other person is crippled? For the Hajj. For the Umrah, you can dedicate reward for the person. Or unless he's crippled, then you can do it for him. Like he's bedridden. Amin wa fiq. That has its own conditions, though, without going into them now. But no, it has its own conditions. Just so you know that what I'm saying to you is incomplete. It has its own conditions. What is the judgment for not going to Muzdalifah? Haram. Going to Muzdalifah is not an integral. It's an obligation that's not an integral. It's a non-integral obligation.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.
I thought that so is there any point of Hajj or Umrah that sexual intercourse invalidates the states of Ihram?
Not if we want to avoid the word invalidate here, which is what I'm doing. Instead of using the word invalidate, I'm using ruin. Because just like Hajj has a difference between Fard and Wajib, and the other chapters of knowledge don't, Hajj also has a difference between Butlan and Fasad, while usually it's the same thing in the other chapters. Butlan is invalidity in here, and Fasad is corruption or ruining. So only one thing invalidates the Hajj, which is apostasy. And only one thing ruins or corrupts the Hajj, which is sexual intercourse before the first tahallul. And the meaning of the ruin here or the corruption here is that you have to complete it and then make it up. You have to complete it and then make it up. So that's why some people might use the word invalidate. I heard Hajj Ali used right here. I heard him on more than one occasion. And I even spoke to him. He still used the word invalidate here. So, yeah, as if he insisted and he sees that it's right. So if you do want to use the word invalidate when it comes to the issue of the sexual intercourse, then you're still going to have to, if you're talking to someone, going to have to clarify for them this invalidation is different from something else that's also called invalidation. Is that clear?
Yeah, that's clear. Thank you.
You're welcome. Question: what does tahallul mean? Tahallul means what gets you out of the state of ihram, which there's two levels for that in the Hajj. You see, Hajj has a number of religious activities. So if you do some activities, it's going to unravel for you. Yani, I like to make the analogy of two knots. It's like when you get into the state of ihram for Hajj, you tie two knots. To be out of the state of ihram completely, you have to untie both knots. So if you do some worships, which we didn't talk about that yet, it's going to untie one of the knots. There's still a knot there, though. Since that knot is there, you cannot have sexual intercourse, yet that's the one still you're still restricted from that one. Sexual intercourse and whatever's related to the women. The issues related to women, like marriage. You can't get married in the state of ihram. When you do both tahalluls, when you untie that second knot, then everything is again lawful for you. Will we cover that next time? We'll see what's in the book. I'm just going to follow the book. If I see a good place to insert it, then I'll insert it. If it's not there. If it's there, then I'll wait for it, inshallah. Question: if one does haram in their Hajj, how does this affect their Hajj? I'm just giving you here a generic answer, which is just like other things. Yani, any worship has its own invalidators, it has its own conditions, it has its own disliked things, and might have sins related to that worship. Like in prayer, you can't go ahead of the imam on purpose. That's major sin. That sin is for the prayer. In prayer, a person might do another sin, possibly. Maybe while he's praying, he handed somebody something that was haram while he was praying. He just handed it to him while he's praying. It was haram. So he committed a sin. So how does this affect his prayer? Like the question you're asking me there is like the same question. How does this affect his prayer? So I don't have very exact thing that I can tell you here, except that just to remind you of generally about what you know. So that's a sin. While he's praying, did that make his prayer imperfect? Allah knows to what degree. Didn't invalidate his prayer though. Same thing while you're fasting. You might do a sin while you're fasting. Does it abolish all your reward or does it decrease your reward, some of it? So maybe it depends on the sin. Amin wa bikum.